The one thing that drives me absolutely fucking crazy is the fact that parents enable their daughters to be weak. Like that's it drives me absolutely nuts. Like so we live next door to our neighbor Kathy, and she has a horse riding school. The parents are over there, and the parents will lift the kid's saddle and help them and do all this to try to assist them. I will help my daughters in no way. If my daughter wants to do it, she has to go and lift it. And she knows that I won't help her. And she knows I will help her, but she knows that culture, a culture of strength and a physical culture is important in our family. And if she can't do something, then I'm like, how, if you can't do this or you can't do what you want to do, what are you going to have to do to make it happen? She's like, I'm going to have to lift weights and train.
Today's episode is with John Welbourn and Chris McQuilkin from Power Athlete Radio. John Welbourn is a 9-year veteran of the NFL and founder of Power Athlete, which is a worldwide strength and conditioning organization focused on empowering performance. John has actually worked with a range of professional athletes, including MLB, NFL, NHL, Olympic athletes, and U.S. military. Chris McQuilkin is the Director of Training and Education for Power Athlete and has led over 100 clinics across 16 countries, introducing the Power Athlete methodology to athletes, sports medicine professionals, and performance coaches. So in today's episode, we chat about how to establish training goals based on where you're coming from, and we also discuss circuit-style training such as CrossFit and how it affects building muscle and actually changing body composition. We're also going to go down a few rabbit holes related to health and aging, as well as raising female athletes. So this was a super fun conversation with John and Chris. I know you're going to enjoy it. Let's jump into the episode. All right, welcome back to MetFlex and Chill. This is Rachel Gregory, your host, and I am here with John and Chris from Power Athlete. What's up, guys? How are you?
Well, thanks. How are you?
Hello.
Good. I'm good. I'm excited to chat with you again. We recorded it probably over a few months ago on your podcast. That was a fun conversation. So I'm excited to kind of dive into training today, hear a little bit more about your guys' background, how Power Athlete came about, and go from there. So do you want to just give our listeners an intro into, your backgrounds and how you got together to start your company?
Wow, man. There's going to be some origin story in this. A little history. My name's John Welbourn. I grew up in Southern California, played a bunch of different sports, ended up, getting into lifting weights because my brothers used to make fun of me for having such a skinny neck. And I decided I wanted to be big and strong. So I started lifting weights. That ended up in, I think I was 6 foot, like 160 pounds when I was a freshman in high school. So I was pretty razor skinny. And then by the end of high school, I was about 6'4", about 260 pounds. So I gained about 100 pounds and grew 4 inches and had about 100 scholarship offers to go play college football. So I went to UC Berkeley, played football there for 4 years, graduated, or actually 5 years, graduated in 4, ended up doing my master's in my 5th year in education, graduated with a BA in rhetoric. And then got drafted to the Philadelphia Eagles, second pick in the 4th round. Went in and was a 5-year starter for the Philadelphia Eagles, and then went to the Kansas City Chiefs. Started there for another 4, and then I went to my 10th year for the New England Patriots. Ended up getting hurt in training camp and coming home having knee surgery. And as I was chilling on the couch, trying to figure out, should I go back and play my 11th year? Should I go to law school, which is actually what I was planning on doing before I got drafted to the NFL. I got a call from this guy who had this little tiny fitness company and asked me if I would come help them develop their technology on how to train athletes. That individual was named Greg Glassman, and that company was CrossFit. So from there, I became an SME for CrossFit, and we taught hundreds of seminars around the globe under the title of CrossFit Football, which at the time was a terrible name because the seminar had nothing to do with football. I had to do with football because I played football, but it was more of a strength conditioning template that we were using, and we were teaching CrossFitters how to use the knowledge that they gleaned through CrossFit on how to train athletes, and more importantly, ramp up performance, not fitness. And over 9 years, we taught 300 plus seminars around the globe, from the Arctic Circle to New Zealand and back and everywhere in between, and coached tens of thousands of athletes in those seminars. Had a free website, CrossFit Football, that put out daily training. And then somewhere around 2012, I got an email that somebody asked, hey, what would CrossFit Football look like without CrossFit? So I wrote a blog post in my blog, Talk to Me, Johnny, which is an homage to Rambo's First Blood, which is one of my favorite movies. For those of you guys that are movie fans, I wrote a blog called The Power Athlete Template. And ironically, the Power Athlete name was actually came from Greg Glassman. We were at a meeting and he was trying to lock me down because he felt that what we were doing was successful. And he, when you're a cult leader, the one thing you don't want to do is have a shining brighter star than you in the cult. And me as a bright shining star in the cult, he wanted to try to cut me off at the knees. So I had to go to this meeting with him and all of his lawyers. And one of the big gripes he had at the time was CrossFit Football's tagline was forging powerful athletes. And CrossFit was using forging elite fitness. And he was upset because he thought that people would rather be powerful than fit. And so after his 27th drink, he screams at me, just change it to forging power athletes. And then he thought for a second, he goes, this seminar would have been a lot better if you just called it Power Athlete. And I wrote that down and I went home and bought that URL and I named my company that the next day. So I got to give a tip of the hat to Greg for not only getting me into this fight, because if he didn't call me and ask me to do CrossFit Football, I would have applied or submitted my applications, go to law school, and I'd probably be a criminal defense attorney in Orange County with my brother and my dad. But now we're doing this. Wow. So we started Power Athlete morphed in 2012. And at that point, I realized that I needed to start developing my own brand because I was building brand loyalty into a name I did not own, which was CrossFit. So Power Athlete and CrossFit really just started in parallel. And after I got that blog post, which is what would CrossFit Football look like without the CrossFit? And I wrote that blog called Power Athlete Template. We created an offline kind of paid back end for a training program called Field Strong. And at about 1,000 people we had within a couple months, we transitioned, started using Train Heroic. And now we put out about 11 programs to about 5,000 people a day around the globe. And then Power Athlete, still having guiding roots in that idea of impacting coaches, started a methodology and a coaching seminar. And now we have our Block One Coaches Network. And so that's basically how we got here. And then about 5 years ago, I got tired of just paying way too much in taxes and property taxes in California. So we got an unsolicited offer on our house, pulled the ripcord and moved here to Austin, Texas, and built everything like the gym and the property and the barn that we're in right now. The podcast room is all on my property. So I tried to bring everything in-house instead of renting a bunch of commercial spaces all over Costa Mesa. So would I miss anything?
Awesome.
No, you got it.
Yeah.
Well, for the listeners, if they want to check out Rachel's appearance on Power Athlete Radio, the premier podcast in strength and conditioning, shout out, episode number 543, An Intelligent Approach to Keto with Rachel Gregory.
Sweet.
Chris McQuilkin, Houston, Texas, local and college lacrosse player. And Texas and lacrosse don't go together, but it provided me the opportunity to go to school. And I didn't get accepted to my business school, so defaulted to what I knew, lifting weights and running fast, and began my education track, health sciences generally. And then I broke my leg my freshman year, which then afforded me a red shirt to go to grad school and seek health behavior change, which I learned a hell of a lot more in my grad school. And that also led me to coaching as a grad assistant coach. And from there, it led me to John and the CrossFit Football seminar, because my first day coaching, I just took on strength and conditioning responsibilities for my team at college. I tore someone's rotator cuff. I injured them on the first rep of the first day of my first coaching responsibility. And I took it very personally. So got on the internet and found John through the seminar. I spent my last dollars as a poor college student. And
I think that was number 3, right?
Number 5, the 5th ever CrossFit Football seminar in 2009. And that was my first exposure to true strength and conditioning and true coaching. D3 athlete, D3 coaches, while God bless them, they're not the sharpest tools in the shed. But yeah, had that opportunity to then apply this information and learn how to coach. The beauty is I was training in the weight room and then following these guys out to practice. I had a rare opportunity to connect both the weight room to the field and back. And that really helped my understanding of movement and education. And then at following school, went to Georgetown University to coach. And this is 2012. The flare went up from John, power athlete, that they were expanding their team. And naturally, I suppose I was memorable because at the seminar, John asked one question to the group.
Yeah.
What are the 3 muscle contractions? Shy kid, of course, in a group of 40 some odd people, grown adults, answered the question.
They did not teach muscle. Like Glassman said that nothing taught in strength conditioning is of value. So why would you teach what a muscle contraction is?
I don't know, but I answered the question, and it was enough several years later to be memorable, to then get the opportunity to intern and teach some seminars, which led to years of travel in the world and coaching coaches how to coach. And that's essentially what we do now. And then thankful for John's return to Texas, because I couldn't stand it on my East Coast trip. But now I get the fortunate opportunity. I coach lacrosse in my small town. I teach lectures, write courses. And then most importantly, as John mentioned, our Block One network, get the fantastic opportunity to empower and mentor other coaches and really show them what it's like to take people where they can't take themselves. Coaches often get locked into sets and reps in this program versus that program. Well, it still means nothing if you can't communicate and really empower this person to make something more of what they believe they are at this moment. So it's up, down, and around, but coaching, teaching, and now mentoring, accepting that role is a lot of this power athlete mission and empowering performance, no matter what you're training for.
Awesome. Great story. Thank you for diving into the background. Cool. Well, let's get into one of the topics we want to talk about. And this kind of goes off of what you just mentioned about, coaching, mentoring, finding the right program for a specific goal. So a lot of people listen to this podcast, their goals, and when it comes to, body composition, changing their body composition, performance, performance in terms of, like elite athletes, I'd say we probably have like more so the general population listening to these podcasts looking to, like I mentioned, change their body composition, maybe build muscle, lose body fat. And when it comes to kind of choosing, a goal, or if you're looking at a training program, or kind of trying to figure out where to start, if your goal is to change your body composition while still getting stronger and building muscle, like how do you kind of go about that? What's the process look like for, choosing, establishing like a training goal, and how that works from your experience?
I think where we really diverged years ago was not training everybody the same. What was really frustrating for me was when I first was approached by CrossFit, people asked me, "Hey, what do you do for your training?" And I would like to do your training program. And I remember telling a guy, "Why in the world would you want to do mine? I'm a 30-year-old NFL player that has been in the NFL for 10 years. And dude, I squatted 600 when I was 19, benched 500 when I was 22. And I went through this whole thing, and I'm like, dude, I'm like 6'6", 300 pounds. Why would you think that my training program would benefit you in any way?" And that was what was really interesting for me, was realizing that that's what most people do. Well, this training program, and you see it all the time in bodybuilding. Hey, this is what I'm doing for my training program, and you should do my training program. I don't believe in that at all. I think everybody is has a certain window where they need a certain training program to hit what they're trying to do. So most people kind of fall in that beginner, amateur kind of progression, and so there has to be a training program for that, and then you basically move them along in their training lifestyle. So a lot like we have chronological age versus physical age, we start talking about training age. How long have you been doing this? And if your training looks like, hey, I just go to 24-hour fitness and do lat pull downs and leg extensions, that's not really training. I'm talking about actually a training program that's dedicated with progressive overload and undulating periodization. It's just some really jiggy stuff that allows you to have a training goal and basically move along it. The one thing that we found that if everybody could start with the singular mindset of just being stronger, everything else seems to come into focus. We run into this with women all the time. Well, I want to be toned. I want to be this. If they just focused on getting stronger, everything else just seems to fall into line. And I think all too often people start with really lofty goals, like, oh, I want to put on big muscles. I want to pack on slabs of muscle. All that stuff happens as a byproduct. I mean, we talk about in the seminar all the time, the SAID principle, specific adaptation to imposed demands. If we can create, or if we can create the demand, your body will adapt. But as we know, your body is difficult to adapt. So sometimes we have to put some pressure on it, and we got to drive it, and there's hard work associated with it. So I think when somebody first comes to us and they're new to barbell training, or they're new to us, the first thing we do is we start them on a program called Bedrock. I tell them it's not going to be easy. They got to be consistent, and they need a singular goal of just becoming stronger and a stronger version of themselves.
And that in line with the goal, there's different phases of goals, and we have our objective is to essentially change their identity, their lifestyle, to incorporate weightlifting, fitness, and then back into healthy diet. So many goals start out as outcomes. I want to bench press this. I want to put on slabs of muscle. I want to lose 30 pounds.
Sure.
So that's an outcome. That's a result. Excellent. From there, we can introduce them or identify where they are in their life cycle as an athlete. Most often they're amateurs, which leads to our Bedrock program. And then we start to have a language that leads to a process goal. So rather than just lose 30 pounds, just put on X. Now it's get back into, or I want to get at my high school weight or my football shape, all these different things that then it's not just an end result. So you get their goal over. It's part of this process that leads to them getting back into shape. And eventually their identity is fitness. It is a weightlifter. It is a power athlete. And then I hate to say this, but I'm a CrossFitter.
Well, I mean, I think CrossFit, I mean, for all the jokes that people make, whether it be on South Park or whatnot, I think CrossFit and Greg Glassman did more for training than any other human being has done on the planet. He's done more to get barbells in people's hands than anybody. I mean, more than maybe Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, Rogue is what, a billion-dollar company ridden on the back of CrossFit, and now with garage gyms. I mean, for all Greg's idiosyncrasies and narcissisms and all the other shortcomings, I mean, the fact that he actually is one of the only people in this world that can say, I influence the globe in a positive way.
I agree.
Pretty amazing.
Another example of identity is the marathon stickers on the back of your car, right? 26.2.
Yeah.
So they're identifying as this. It meant something to them. And then what got them there? A process, dedication, and goal. They didn't stop at that marathon. It continued to, and then, I mean, right at the finish line, you got to sign up for your next one, right?
Well,
but we want strength.
Yeah.
More importantly, rather than
I'll give you I'll give you a funny anecdote because this just hit me on Halloween. We went over to go so we live on a pretty big property, and there's a whole bunch of properties around us. So there's no place for our kids to trick or treat. So we end up going to neighborhoods. So we went over to a party at a friend's house. My daughter rides with the other girl. And so we go to this like Halloween deal. And as I'm sitting in the kitchen, trying to negotiate candy with my kids. So like they get all this candy, they have to dump it out. And then I allow them to negotiate like 5 pieces. And then I get the rest of it. And I just basically just throw it in the trash. Because if I don't, and I know they've hidden it in their pockets. So that's why I negotiate 5 pieces.
Did they blame it on me one year?
Yeah, they totally blamed it. They hid all this candy in their pockets. And then they knew I would find the wrappers. So they put them underneath the couch. And then the dogs found the wrappers, and then they blamed it on Tex. I'm like, Tex doesn't even come up here, you weirdos. So as I'm sitting in the kitchen, this dad, the people whose house we were over, the dad asked me, he goes, hey, can I talk to you about getting in shape and training? And I was like, yes, let's hear what you got. So of course, late 40s, early 50s, goes to the doctor, has a bad series of blood work. So for the last 2 years, cholesterol's been through the roof. I mean, everything's all fucked up. And so the doctor wants to put him on statins and, all this, high blood pressure medication and all this. And he's pretty nervous. So he asked me, he's like, hey, can you help me with this? I'm like, what's the problem? And he takes me through and he goes, what do you think? And I was like, what do you mean? What do I think? Like, he's like, how do I improve my blood work? I'm like, lose 20 pounds. It's universally true through all the hundreds of different individuals we worked with, that whatever your blood work looks like, if you lose 20 to 30 pounds, regardless of changing any part of your life, your blood work will come into line. And he's like, okay, so I need to lose 20 or 30 pounds. Yes. And we went through this whole thing of like, how do I do it? What does it look like? What does the nutrition look like? And then he hits me with like, what should be my one singular goal? And I always tell people, if you can focus on being stronger, everything else seems to come in. And he goes, well, how do we get stronger? I'm like, well, one, it comes with hard work. I've been working on some writing recently, and I hit Chris with an interesting one. that I told him, I'm like, each morning puts a man on trial and each evening passes judgment, which is Royal Smith's quote. And I told him, I'm like, dude, every morning you got to get up. You got to chart your calories. I showed him my Fitness Pal. We put together a bunch of diet recommendations. You got to chart how much are you eating? Are you in a caloric deficit? Are you weighing yourself? What are you doing for your training? What do you have available? What can you do? And went through all this stuff. And I told him, like, all the cardio in the world is going to help you build an aerobic base. But at the end of the day, if you want to change your body composition, the best way to do it is lift weights. I'm like, even if you were to maintain your body weight and put on 20 pounds of muscle, fat's extremely oxidative, muscle is extremely insulin sensitive. Just putting on 20 pounds of muscle will change your body composition dramatically. And so as we get through this whole thing, he's like, I don't know about that lifting weights thing. It sounds really hard. And so like this is the interesting, paradox that we run into. And thank God we don't deal in this market very often, but it's pretty wild that somebody has bad blood work, 2 or 3 years of bad blood work, and, they need to make a change. And as they're going through and they ask for help. So, they've humbled themselves to ask for it. And the deal I give them, I'm like, dude, I'm a big believer in building aerobic base. I think you need to chart your calories. When I asked him, like, hey, what do you, just give me an example of what you ate today. I mean, probably was eating somewhere around 30 to 50 grams of protein, probably 3,000 calories, majority of his carbohydrates. So as I kind of rescaled this diet, he's like, wow, that's a lot of meat. It's a lot of protein. Isn't that bad for my kidneys? So then we got into that piece. And it's amazing, all of these like preconceived notions that people are driving back to as are more excuses because it's not easy. It's a lot easier to open a bag of chips and consume 1,000 calories as to, cook a steak and try to do the same thing. And it just was wild that as I started providing every bit of information he needed to be successful, all he hit me was all the reasons that he couldn't do it. And I'm like, dude, this is what plagues the majority of the population. And the sad thing I told him is I was like, hey man, I laid out a great game plan for you, but unfortunately, until you have a heart attack or something crazy happens, you won't make a life change. And he's like, well, no, I want to make a life change. I'm like, okay, great. Pull out your checkbook, write me a $10,000 check. I won't cash it. But no, I told, this is exactly what I said. Yeah. I said, write me a $10,000 check. I'll hold it and I won't cash it. And I'll make you a bet. And I'll set it. I'll let you set all the parameters. I'll give you 3 months. We'll do 1 pound a week for 3 months. Went through this whole thing. I'm like, all you have to do is lose 12 pounds in this piece and I'll give you the check back. If you don't hit any of these markers, I'll cash it. And the dude wouldn't write a check. I would have taken that bet. And it's just the fact that very few people are really ready for accountability. I think in their mind, there's like this, like, what's it called? Like, there's like a disconnection between like, this is what I know I need to do.
Well, I mean, they're looking at the peak. They're looking at the top of Mount Everest and not looking at the small dominoes. I'm combining so many analogies and pictures here.
No, I mean, but it's true. Like, the reason I named my blog 10 years ago, It's a Long Road, because when people ask me, like a guy hit me, he goes, how long will it take me to get stronger? And I was like, wow, like a lifetime?
That's an excellent answer.
It takes a lifetime. Strength is cultivated over a lifetime. And what's wild is I've been working on some writing for Chris, and I went back and I read a book that was written in 1925. I'll pull the dude's name up, by Roger Edgren. And he wrote a book, it was amazing. The same problems that we're discussing here, this guy was writing a book in 1925 about, and he was talking about how like physical culture is something that takes generations. So like if he said that, he made a good point. He goes, if somebody's like a farmer or rancher or hard worker and their kids grow up in this, their kids will be strong and their kids' kids will be strong. He goes, if you take somebody that, off the farm and put them into an office job, it'll only take 2 generations for them to swing back to smaller, weaker versions. And it only takes 2 generations if you put them back into like a physical culture, strength training kind of deal. And it was pretty wild.
I agree with that, but that's one of the objectives of creating this identity, this physical culture. So maybe an appeal versus the $10,000. Like, I don't know how old his kids are, 10.
No, he's got, the problem is,
connecting to, hey, what do you want? Do you want your kids to have the same damn kidney stones and problems?
Well, but here's the problem. There's a feeling, I think, which is pretty wild. And thank God it's not around people that my wife and I are, because my wife is actually fucking in phenomenal shape. Like my wife is people ask like, hey, you go to the gym every day? I'm like, dude, seriously, I'm just trying to like be in good enough shape so that I can go out in public with my wife. She's fucking shredded. But it's wild. Like everywhere we go, somebody stops and asks her, like, hey, how do I get arms like that? How do I get shoulders like that? She gets hit on these questions and she tells people all the time. She's like, I eat a high protein diet. I do, the aerobic work. I walk the dogs and I bang heavy weights 4 to 5 days a week. And, every time she says that, what they say to her? No, that can't be it. That sounds too hard. Like I'm not kidding you. Like it's to the point where like, I'm like, hey, what would you tell a lady? She's like, the same thing I tell them all. And then they always give me this look like there's no way that's it. Won't I get big and bulky? And my wife's like, I've been, like it's so wild. And then she always get that, I put on muscle really easy, which I think is hilarious too, because I've been trying to put on muscle easy for years and it doesn't seem to come on that. But I think what's wild, and especially for people that are kind of upwardly mobile, successful, there's this idea that there's some secret hack, there's some secret squirrel program where I don't really have to work hard, but I can somehow get what I want. That's what I think. That's what I think they're searching for.
But I mean, there's a connection. I don't know what the gentleman did for a living, but finding a passion or something it does come easy to him, and then taking him back to the beginning of that. And then making a connection to say, well, this is this. Do more than you did yesterday. Find the boiling point. Yeah,
but you got to remember, he probably did not grow up in a physical culture.
Well, unacceptable for him to hand that off to his kids.
Well, but think about that. Like the amount of fathers and a lot of parents that I've met that didn't grow up in like a physical culture weightlifting deal. I mean, I got into it early because my brothers were all big and strong, and they used to make fun of me about it, which I think is also an interesting piece in that I think shame is a powerful motivator. And unfortunately, in today's world, we're not allowed to shame anybody. Unfortunately, I think, shit, if I hadn't got shamed when I was younger for having such a skinny neck, I don't know if I would have started lifting weights. But
you still have a skinny neck.
No,
I kid. But Rachel, I recall you're an athlete all growing up through like passion for like through your father's push. Like what was that? I know his sister.
Yeah. My dad played college football, so I grew up, all around sports, and he only had 2 daughters, and he was, still playing basketball to this day, competitively in his 60s. So I always had that kind of drive and just grew up in that kind of athletic world. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. I think one thing I want to kind of go back to, you mentioned about, the female side of things, because we have a lot of females listening to this podcast. And one of the things for me that's always the hardest kind of thing to convince, a new female client coming to me, and I get this question a lot, so I want to kind of pose it to you guys and see what you do when you work with females. But that concept of like, okay, I want to change my body composition, and I've been kind of brainwashed to think that I just need to continue restricting and losing weight, right? Losing body fat to get to that, you mentioned looking that toned way and things like that. But how do you change, a woman's mind in the sense of like, you're not going to get big and bulky from lifting weights. Like, how do you go about that? Because I get this question a lot when I'm on other podcasts, and I have like the way that I try to do it, but like, is there like, what's your convincing, a way that you explain to females, like if you want to change your body composition, if you want to get toned, you have to lift weights. You're not going to get big and bulky. And like, how do you go about explaining that, especially for someone who is maybe in that CrossFit world and they see those elite CrossFit athletes at the games and those females? How do you go about that?
I think I think what hurt CrossFit might have been the CrossFit Games individual. Well, like the guys are just skinny, small dudes. I mean, what are they, like 175, 180 pounds? So like seeing a jacked, guy sub 200 pounds isn't impressive. But I've always said that the most impressive thing to me was actually the amount of muscle that the female CrossFitter carries. And the girls that are really good at it are usually 165, 160 pounds and are just, absolute monsters. So I think a lot of women, when they came to CrossFit, they were like, oh, I don't want to look like those girls. Mm-hmm. Whereas not that they will. I just think women have this misconception that somehow you touch the weight and through osmosis, you're going to get fucking big and bulky. It doesn't work like that. I think, man, I think the one thing that has been universally true for us with all the girls and all the ladies and all the women that we've trained is that women enjoy being strong more than any other person I've ever met, because I think women aren't supposed to, or at least our society teaches women to not be strong. So I think empowering women to lift weights and move heavy objects, actually, those were by far the most rewarding clients I've ever had. And I actually enjoyed when I did own a commercial gym, or we owned a CrossFit, I actually enjoyed coaching the ladies classes because, one, they were way more receptive. They had a better attention to detail, and they legitimately wanted to work harder. And when you were positive with things, they responded much better. Whereas I think sometimes the guys were like, almost like, not nearly as engaged in it. So I think one thing that we found that was beneficial for women was like having a buddy, having a friend, like here's somebody like a mentor in so many ways. I met my wife at the gym, and she was always a pretty high performer, competed in the CrossFit Games. And the class that she would come to, there were a high amount of women that came because they were friends, and they had this kind of social interaction outside of the gym. And a new woman would come in, they were really welcoming. And I think they just saw, hey, these girls are doing it, I'm able to do it. I think it's really difficult without, or women struggle without community. Whereas I think guys are much more solemn creatures. I mean, that's why, if you look at like the rate of suicide, it's dramatically higher for men, because men don't tend to have a lot of friends, and they tend to be more solo creatures. So I think having some form of, don't worry, Chris, that's why I'm here for you. But I think women having some community involved, and feeling like they're not doing it themselves, and also having some realistic goals.
Yeah. But I want to pile on to the community is one aspect, and accomplishing. So session one, accomplishing something. There's two big goals that I like to connect with female athletes. The first is going to be a pull-up. It's not going to come day one, but what can come day one is a deadlift. Mm-hmm. Whether it's and then again, we need to start 75, 95. So something they can do. And then it's up to the coach to really make that something. Say we do connect 95 pounds. Let's bring 95 pounds into real life. That's 2 freaking suitcases. I got 5 sisters. I've traveled a lot with women. That's 2 freaking suitcases.
Or a 5th grader.
Okay, then a 5th grader. So it's then making this connection, and it is a big deal. And then next Tuesday, we're going to come in and we're going to do more than we did yesterday. So the pull up, that's overtime, and Muscle Maven, Pal, she does a great job of presenting pull ups to the female as an excellent goal that you need to work to, but it is still a reality. So connecting those were short-term accomplishment right now, day one, and then we're going to do more because this is hard work. And then setting that Everest, that moment of a pull-up that then they can work towards, and pair that with an example within the community, within the gym. Let's just say our other athlete, she's been here 6 months, coming up 1, 2, 3 times a week, and she was able to accomplish the pull-up.
The one thing I have 2 older, or I have twin daughters, so I got 2 little girls and I got a little boy. The one thing that drives me absolutely fucking crazy is the fact that parents enable their daughters to be weak. Like that's it drives me absolutely nuts. Like so we live next door to our neighbor Kathy, and she has a horse riding school. So she has about 50 horses. I mean, there must be 100+ girls and maybe a handful of boys that ride, and they do hunter jumpers and jumping. And she has this huge horse school. I mean, I think she told me the other day she has 200 people on the waiting list to try to come and ride at her barn.
Wow.
So, and she's always said, you know what, I'm doing my best to raise kids. These girls come at like 5, 6, and they, ride all through high school. And then she's like, I want them to be accomplished, humans and good women, and just really a really solid lady. But the one thing that blows my mind is I'll go over and, the parents are over there, and the parents will lift the kid's saddle and help them and do all this to try to assist them. I will help my daughters in no way. If my daughter wants to do it, she has to go and lift it. And she knows that I won't help her, and she knows I will help her, but she knows that culture, a culture of strength and a physical culture is important in our family. And if she can't do something, then I'm like, how, if you can't do this, or you can't do what you want to do, what are you going to have to do to make it happen? She's like, I'm gonna have to lift weights and train. So I think that there's some of the things that they've been, as I'm sure like your dad too, like I'm sure weakness was never, or the fact that you were a woman, oh, don't lift that. You're a girl. You shouldn't be able to lift that. And I hear this stuff constantly from these parents, and especially from these dads. Well, or my one daughter went as a gargoyle, and my other daughter went as she's been watching the Arrow on CW. So she went as
you've been watching the Arrow.
No, I've already seen it. So they've been watching it. So she went as whatever, one of the Archer chicks.
You know their name.
I don't know who she was. I think it was it'll come to me. But like, she showed up with a bow and arrow, and the other daughter's a gargoyle. All the other girls are dressed more in, I would say, like, feminine 10-year-old, like princess kind of outfits. And like, that's, I don't know, like I'm not raising my daughters to be little princesses that need to be kept in pretty little boxes. And, what's important for me is not only, like physical strength, that the fact that I raise, intelligent, confident, very, very abled, young women. And I tell them all the time, I'm like, I'm not raising princesses. Like, you got to get a different dad for that one. You guys will be smart, you'll be educated, and you guys will be capable, and you'll be willing to like survive whatever life throws at you without the feeling that, you're some damsel in distress that some guy on a white knight has to ride up and save you. And I said, if that happens, it's great, but I hope, he rides behind you and you get to ride in front of him. So I think like the idea of raising capable women is important to me and my wife. But like that idea of like physical culture and strength, and that it's cultivated over a lifetime, I think is something that we've been talking about for years. And it's sad when I'm not ripping on anybody else's parenting in any way, but it's weird for me to hear parents kind of treat their girl like, oh, they're girls, they shouldn't have to do that. Or the parents are so quick to jump in and do things. And I'm like, why? They're able-bodied. They should be able to, like, what are they going to be? Like, what are you teaching them when you're not around? So I think that's been really pretty fascinating for me, especially as a dad of daughters.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree completely. Chris, were you going to say something? Or did you want to say something?
Two things. First, to make a quick point, rather than just fighting with logic to answer their question of the muscle bulk and aiming to calorie depletion versus more protein diet, as we would argue, focus on what they can do, and then just build off that, whether it's dopamine release or just a sense of accomplishment and getting just this rise out of them and building on that. So rather, I would just avoid that question and then focus on what they can do. That's me personally. But one thing I remember John saying, it had to have been a podcast, done freaking 500, but saying, like, telling your girls, like, one of them inquired about cheerleading, and you said that, like, I don't want you to cheer for other people, I want people to cheer for you. Yeah, something along those lines.
I have and this is going to sound really awful, but like when they were pretty young, they got hit up to be on this like cheerleading squad for something. And I remember being like, I don't know, like, if you guys want to do cheerleading later in life and it involves some form of dance and athletic, and, whenever, you go to football games and you see like the girls that are really athletic that are able to do the flips and like cheerleading, I appreciate that. But just you showing up on a skirt to like, with a megaphone cheering for some boys, I'm not in on it. I think that you should do something that has other people cheer for you. So that was just me as a father, having played in the NFL for a decade and run on the field, and that, like, it's nice to hear people cheer for you. So I've told them later in life, if you want to get into some form, and my girls still go to gymnastics. So we have a few non-negotiables. One, they have to play a sport. Two, they have to have a certain grade. And then three, they have to do gymnastics. And they will go to gymnastics until the people tell us not to bring them there anymore. So just the body awareness and the movement through space that allows them to go on and do other things. Like my daughter, she rides horses 5 days a week. And then I think she goes to gymnastics 2 days a week. And then my other daughter goes to gymnastics 2 days a week. And then she swims and plays basketball and does a few other sports. But like, I think that the body awareness and the movement through space that gymnastics teaches has like put them dramatically ahead of other kids in sports. Like, especially like I watch my daughter who rides, she is so much stronger and so much more capable in the saddle than the other girls, just because of the training that she's done leading up to it. Like my other daughter is so good in the water. And I really think it comes from just that, they've been going to gymnastics since they were 2 years old. So what's cool is I don't really push weightlifting on them yet, But the other day, we went to a swim meet and my daughter was slow off of the blocks. And she asked me in the car, she's like, Dad, I would have won that if I was faster off the blocks. How do I get faster off the blocks? I'm like, you need stronger legs. We need more trunk strength. And we went through it. And she's like, well, is there something we could do up in the building to help? And I was like, as a matter of fact, there is. We'll start next week. So I think that, I don't necessarily want to force them into anything, but I have a few non-negotiables. And one of those is gymnastics. And the other one is they have to play a sport. And then there has to be a certain level in school. And if they don't hit the marks in school, then things get peeled out, which is how I grew up. Like we had a certain level of education that was important. And if we didn't meet it, then we didn't get to do other stuff.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny that you mentioned gymnastics because that was me. My mom put my sister and I in gymnastics when we were younger. My sister started and she did really well. She loved it. And I would go to practice and I would never wear the leotard because I was such a tomboy and I wanted to go play basketball. So I would only wear my basketball t-shirt and basketball shorts. And eventually my mom gave in and she was like, all right, fine, you can go play basketball. But now looking back on it, I'm like, I wish I would have stayed, in the gymnastics realm a little bit more. I always thought it was so girly and I was like I said, I was a tomboy. So I wanted to be out playing basketball and kind of looking back on it, I'm like, man, I wish I did, stay with it for a little bit longer. But yeah,
it's important. I mean, the place that the girls go is it's called Afrotech, and it's not like what you would think in terms of this is maybe this is just an evolution of time in that there's men and women instructors. So some of the girls who are instructors, and then there's a couple guide instructors, and they really kind of mix and match. And there's actually more boys. I remember, man, so years ago, I was pretty little and I got into martial arts, and there was a movie called Gymkata. Don't you remember? I don't think you ever watched it, no. But it was one of our favorite movies. And the dude was a gymnast who was also a badass, martial arts dude. And I remember telling my mom, I'm like, Mom, I'd like to go to gymnastics. And I think she made some derogatory comment to me about, straight men don't go to stuff like that or something. And I never got to go. But I still take my son. My son goes 2 days a week as well, and he's 5. And I told the guy who's the owner, I told him, I'm going to keep bringing my son here until you tell me he can't come anymore. And he's like, okay. He's like, bring him for as long as you want. And I think it's just because that level of movement and the tumbling, and I think it's just really good for them as individuals just to be able to move through space. And I only know this because later in life, when I was in high school, I played sports with some guys. One of the guys I played with at the Kansas City Chiefs, Boomer Grigsby, his mom owned a gymnastics studio, and he was a world champ trampoline gymnast. Dude, his movement through space and the things he could do as 235 pound, 6 foot tall, 235 pound fullback, he could do backflips. I mean, the dude was so athletic. And I remember thinking shit, if only I'd had the opportunity to do it. So I think a big part of, at least for me, is maybe righting some of the wrongs, but I think you have to be able to provide your kids a good foundation of physical culture and, something that they do is at a young age. You cultivate a mindset of strength, and then hopefully teach them that, every diet or every meal has to be surrounded around protein. I mean, that's the one thing that drives me nuts, especially when we go over, with my daughter and their friends, the fact, they had friends over and I cooked steaks, and my kid, my daughter's diving and eating these steaks, and these other girls were like, you guys eat this? And I'm like, you guys don't? And they were like, no, not very often. So it's interesting, the fact that I think people raise their sons maybe different, or I don't know, maybe they don't raise their sons, but maybe they raise their sons different than their daughters. And sounds like your dad raised you guys the way he thought that you should be raised, which is the way I try to raise my daughters and my son.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. And I definitely can relate to everything you said in terms of, growing up and just not being treated like a girl or whatever, in that sense. So one more topic I want to kind of touch on, and this kind of piggybacks off of some of the things that we were talking about, but there is, I feel like for myself and with a lot of the clients that I work with, I either kind of have these two extremes where it's I have a female client coming to me where they're just doing a lot of training. They're both of, I have both scenarios where they can't change their body composition. They can't get to the goal that they want. And I have one scenario where, they're just training 6 or 7 days a week. They're going to, circuit classes, CrossFit. I was there myself. and they're like, I'm doing all this training, I'm doing all this activity, and I can't get to the goal I want. So I have like that side, and then there's another side where it's like they are just, hesitant to even start to pick up a weight, which we just talked about, right? So kind of this concept of like overtraining versus undertraining, like trying to find that balance to hit that goal. How do you deal with that when you have like, especially I feel like with people who are more of that, have that personality where it's like, go, like do more versus that other side where it's like, oh, like I can do a little bit, but that's maybe too much for me. Like, how do you help people find that balance? Like, okay, this is the amount that you need to do to get to the result that you want. And doing more is not necessarily better in that sense, and how that can kind of actually hinder your outcomes. So I'm just curious, like if you guys work with any clients who struggle with either one of those scenarios.
I'm gonna let Chris take it, but the one thing which we find all too often, the one thing I'll say is that people mistake activity for achievement. And we see this all too often, especially with women, where they feel that they can somehow make up for a lack of training intensity by just stacking volume on volume and volume. And that's been a really interesting thing, especially when we deal with women, that like the quality and the intensity of the work has to be high if the outcome is to increase, to get you where you want. You just can't stack volume on volume on volume and give me a ton of submaximal efforts and expect to get where you want to go. So, I mean, the analogy of like, a landmine, if you tap it a little bit with a hammer over and over again, it's not going to go off, but one big hit and it goes off, I think is a good analogy for a lot of women who just have this idea that, hey, if I just keep stacking low to medium intensity volume, I'll somehow back into what I want. And unfortunately, your body just adapts. And when you do a ton of that, you just end up looking like chewed bubblegum.
Well, a couple things. The Callie Hinsman, our former coach and now podcast producer, she had a quote when I first met her and we were training partners probably a decade ago. I'm like a shark. If I stop moving, I'll die. That was her training mindset every single day. So she would hit our training session and then go to another gym and continue to smash it. Well, there's benefits to the mindset. You can't necessarily coach the mindset that she had. So it was a matter of taking that mindset and then directing it at sleep, at nutrition. So she still had the opportunity to attack this goal with intensity of 10 cities. But now it was, okay, I'm going to sleep like I train. I'm going to start to take my food the same approach as I train. Now, within her training, it's finding things that are not going to take away from her body composition or her performance or her muscle growth. And that's through movement challenges. I mentioned the pull-up earlier. Well, she was crushing pull-ups, but let's find things she can't do that are not going to take away. Different gymnastics movements. We're not talking advanced gymnastics, but changing orientations, planes of motion.
Change of direction.
She was
like an alligator.
Oh, yeah. Well, she was a former lacrosse goalie turned power lifter. She's used to just hanging out in essentially a wide squat position, an athletic position. That's it. Get her out of the cage, get her out of the squat rack. She might as well be a shark just swimming. But so introducing these things that are still take the mental fortitude, but they're not impacting the body. Introducing her to spike ball and different sports within that still have the same time commitment or still physically exhausting, but not detrimental to her health, her wellness, her goals, which then overtraining leads to poor sleep and works away. The harder you work, the more it works away from what you're aiming to accomplish. So bottom line, take that intensity, that mindset that you have, and apply it to a limitation that is sleep, nutrition, that's taking away from your goal, that you're admitting to not doing this, maybe taking this mindset that you have and applying it to not drinking alcohol.
Whoa. Let's not go crazy here.
Not me.
Oh,
them, John.
Oh.
Do as I say, not as I do.
I like to find people other things for them to drink. I'm like, you don't have to go have 70 vodka Red Bulls, maybe one glass of wine. But Callie's like, if Callie was going out, she's probably
how big's that glass?
She's listening to this podcast right now. She's popping out the lens on her glasses and just going vodka Red Bulls.
Yeah, we partied hard. So yeah, then
now she's a mom.
Yes, she is now, and she's taking that mindset. And then Josie's going to be an amazing athlete one day.
Yeah.
But then now finding movements that you can't do. So this is what essentially Power Athlete does with different training methodologies and programs that we offer, is expose you to these challenging movements that we disguise as warm-ups that you're exposed to suck at until you don't.
Well, the one thing that was always really cool for me is when we would get women into strength training and they would be on the linear progression or moving along. And then all of a sudden, like you said, there would be something real world. Hey, I had to do this. I couldn't do this before. I remember one of my first clients, Nicole Bishop, she had these two monster dogs, these big ass, like 100-pound wolf dogs. And she could only walk one of them at a time because the dog would just pull her everywhere. And so then after she got really strong and was training, she could actually go out and walk both dogs at the same time. And then the dogs were like, she was walking along and like a squirrel ran across. And she's like, in years past, I would have just let the leash go because the dog would have pulled me down and I probably would have broken my neck. She like dug her heels in, leaned back and healed both of these 100-pounders. And like at that moment, when she came in and told me the story, I was like, what do you want to do? She's like, let's go bang some weights. And she was in on that. And it was amazing where she was kind of like, like a little lukewarm. I agree with you. But like that one practical realization of like, now I can walk both dogs and I was able to dig my heels in and get them to stop was like, at that point she was a lifer.
Yes. And then I don't know if it's a difference between men and women, but that moment that you mentioned with the older gentleman where, man, needs a heart attack. He needs a family member passing away, so on and so forth to make a change. It's with female athletes, from my experience, it's finding that moment where they, oh my God, I can't do this. And then you see their posture rise. And the cool thing about working with teenage athletes is like especially the taller ones, is getting them to realize and then posturing up versus hiding. I'm taller earlier. I'm going to have poor posture. I shamed those
kids when we taught that high school seminar. So we taught a kind of we developed like a strength conditioning seminar for kids that were like 14 to 17. And so we did a test here and it was awesome because these kids came in. One, the amount of voice cracking was like the funniest thing I've been around. Like the amount of like, oh dude, like these kids are right in that like kind of middle puberty thing where like their voices are just cracking up and down. Like it was hysterical. And some of the kids were taller and you could tell that they hadn't been around taller people because they were all kind of hunched over and kind of like squatting down. I'd walk over and I'd stand up straight and I'd kind of get them to stand up. I'm like, you have to pretend that there's always somebody taller than you around. Be proud, be tall. And that's, like my one daughter she's 10 and she's already 5 feet tall. And it's something she's getting into because she's taller than all the kids. And I'm like, you don't want to have poor posture. Like that is the worst thing you can do is have bad posture. And all you have to do is like my favorite during the Olympics, when you see the gymnastics girls, they always have amazing posture. You know why? Because they're super short and they're fighting for every like millimeter of height that they could get. But like every one of those gymnastics girls stands up so straight because that's just, like they have just amazing. So that's something we always talk about. Like
those volleyball players got great posture too, because they know they're fucking awesome.
Yeah. But a lot of those girls are tall early. So they'll be kind of like hunched over a little bit.
So that's why I mentioned the deadlift earlier as a good marker day one goal of accomplish something, because the back squat on the back, they'll almost default and reinforce the poor posture to begin. They haven't yet learned the power behind posture. Speed is a product of posture. Power is a product of posture.
You can teach posture in the weight room.
Exactly. And that's why I reference the deadlift, because we can coach them into, and if you find yourself limited in your communication as a trainer or a coach, I'm drawing a blank here, but the hex bar, ultimate go-to.
You mean the trap bar?
Yep. That easy go-to, not necessarily a lot of coaching involved. You can cue good posture by just making eye contact with them. And it doesn't have to be a perfect movement. We just have to get them to accomplish something. The trick is not allowing them to fail. Failure would be if I don't think they can lift 95 pounds, or I make a mistake and I just put 95 on there and then they don't do it. Mistake. Start with, 10s on the side. So then it's still like those green 10s that we have, like Olympic lifting 10s that still don't change the movement, but still challenge the movement. and then just go up. And again, be enthusiastic. Like that's hella good.
I'm sure you run into this too. And I think we discussed it on our podcast, convincing women that they're not going to die if they eat a high protein diet. I mean, like the two things that I feel like we've been talking ad nauseum for over a decade is one, getting women to eat enough protein, and two, they're going to get less bulky on the heavy weights than doing the light weights for lots of reps. There's this idea that light weights for toning, which I don't know, like I'd like to go back in time and figure out who said that.
Less mills.
And then fucking blow them up. Like the other, like there are so many misconceptions. And what's so wild is that, and like I go back and forth on this, like for all the gender equity stuff that we're kind of in 2021, where women are fighting so hard to be as good as men, or, vice versa. And what's so weird is like, they're like, at least for me, there's so many things that women do that are so much better than men that make them women. Like, I'm like, I don't know why you guys want to at least maybe it's archaic thinking, but yeah, there is like, it's like the yin and the yang. Like there's all these things that women do that like men can't, that I don't know why women are so excited to do all the things that men do. And I'm like, for example, like when my kids are crying, believe me, they go see my wife. Like if they skin a knee, my wife's going to believe me. She's going to calm them a lot better than I can. Like there's just a lot of things in like the way my wife and I split everything up, but it's pretty interesting as parents, like maybe it's the, 30, 50 years and who knows, but like the idea that like, girls eat majority of carbohydrates. I mean, and I see it with even like my daughter's friends when they come over. I'm like, oh my God, like what are they feeding these kids? Like they're probably feeding the sons different than they're feeding the daughters, or maybe we're at a time where we're feeding kids this. And it just, man, it blows my mind. And I'm kind of glad that we don't really get over and have to deal with a lot of these normies so much, but man, it's but that's a struggle. Like the idea, like light weights for toning and a high carb, low protein diet is ideal for women, which I think is the exact opposite approach, and something we've been raging against for over 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you mentioned Ashley a little earlier, like that's really one of the main reasons we created our Muscle Science for Women program, was to, help women feel empowered. Like that's the word that we associate with that is like empowerment. And you were talking to this, but just, the being able to lift those weights or do that deadlift, like that empowerment that you feel from that. And I know like I had that moment myself, like that just translates not just to your body composition, but like every other part of your life. Right. And so that's really what like our goal with the Muscle Science for Women program is, not just to teach females about, how to lift weights and how to, have that intensity that we were talking about and build muscle, but it's more so like all of that stuff translates to like feeling empowered through all other aspects of like their life. So I think you guys hit on that a lot. So I appreciate that.
How do you combat like the one thing that blows my mind, and I see this all the time on like social media, with the CrossFit girls or whatnot, like they'll post stuff and like, not only am I impressed by female athletes, like I hope to one day my daughters, graft onto it as well as that, but it's always really interesting to read the derogatory comments from guys. And I read this stuff and I'm like, are these guys just trolling to be dicks? Or is that really the mindset? Cause I always look at it and I'm like, man, like that's impressive. Like that girl, like excellent moving underneath the bar. Like I'm excited to see not only like them bang heavy weights and do this, but it's amazing how quickly dudes are to like, looks like a man, that's this, and like just shit on people. And
I'll speak to this. This has been going on pre-internet. So one of my sisters, she got a freshman scholarship offer to Texas A&M for golf. Freshman, captain of the golf team in high school, and then quit after that year. So she was kicking the boys' ass, and they just gave her, things they said to her, drove her away from the sport and quit. Broke my dad's heart, of course.
Well, your dad's a big golfer.
I know. And it's like she's found success through art, so led her into this creative phase. But yeah, is that male insecurity? I don't know. I mean, you're getting out drove. Maybe.
Well, then you know what? Like I always looked at like if somebody's better than me, the way I'm not going to even up is by fucking belittling them, but by actually going back and being like, hey, if this chick's out driving me, then you know what? I need to go work my game and fucking use this as a wake up call.
Why you had success as an athlete?
No, but it's like the sad part about our society a little bit, and it's the crab in the bucket. If you throw one crab in the bucket, it'll crawl out. If you throw two crabs in the bucket, one crab will crawl out, the other will pull it back in. You throw a whole bunch of crabs, the minute one comes out, they'll basically kill that crab. And like it's this like crab mentality, crab in the bucket. And I'm just amazed that like these girls will post some like there was I can't remember who it was, but one of the CrossFit girls who posted something, and dude, I want to say the girl almost snatched like double body weight. I mean, like pretty like shit where you're like, holy hell. Like, and the amount of comments of guys just fucking trolling them. And I'm reading this and being like, I'm so fucking embarrassed as not only a population in humanity in this. Like I think like I said earlier, like there's a shame's a powerful motivator. Like it was for me growing up. Like if I wasn't able to do something, there wasn't like, well, it's okay for you to suck. No, there was a standard that needed to be held. I felt shame about it. And so then we had to go and figure out a way to make this work. And what's amazing is, like the amount of like, I just like, is it insecurity? Is it fucking shortcomings? I mean,
I think it's insecurity, jealousy, not being like feeling like if they see a female do that and they're like, oh shit, I can't even do that. Then it's like, you're going to project that, on, but I don't know. It's just ridiculous.
No, it is ridiculous. Like I see it all the time. And like it just, I don't know if it irks me as much as it's more like, is this the I don't know. Like, I mean, how, how, like as as I would say, a strong girl, a strong lady, strong woman, in like living in this digital age and on social media, podcasts, this whole deal, is that something you encounter? And more importantly, like, would you just fucking delete it or be like, go fuck yourself, douchebag? Like, how do you deal with that stuff? Because when I read it, I want to go Jay and Silent Bob and go be like, knock on the door and been like, oh, user 1, 2, 3, bam, and hit them.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Honestly, I personally haven't, dealt with that myself, but I've seen it out there, like you mentioned. And I mean, just ignoring it and like realizing that it is probably stemming from a lot of insecurity and like, who even cares? Like it's just, I don't know. I ignore it if I see that, but I don't know. I think we've gotten better though, maybe like over the past, just like you said, there was a whole like, lift lighter weights and get toned and all that. And now it's like females are finally starting to realize that, okay, it's okay to do things like CrossFit. It's okay to lift heavy weights and, feel good about doing that and getting stronger. Like that's okay and something that you should strive for. So, but yeah. I think this is an awesome conversation. I kind of want to wrap up here. I do ask one last question usually at the end of my podcasts, and you can both answer this. So is there anything in the last year that you've changed your mind about and why? It's a hard question, so. Give me anything at all.
Last year. Yeah, you know what? There was an interesting, so as you know, I'm a kind of an avid reader, and like I think what's pretty wild is I think I had more faith in humanity for being, or I had greater faith in people to be smarter earlier on, like pre-pandemic. And I didn't realize exactly how powerful fear as a motivator was until we got into this pandemic. And I'm put it like this: I'm constantly amazed, one, that people are not looking at things objectively, that they're allowing themselves to be polarized. And and so like I've kind of gone into this piece of like, is this like is this an evolution or a de-evolution of humanity? Why are people becoming dumber? Or is this just something that's happened over time? And unfortunately, you have to go back and read to kind of get it. But T.S. Eliot made a good point where he said, humankind cannot bear very much reality. And I remember I read that the other day and I sent it to Rob Wolf. And he's like, "Ooh, that's a goodie, because isn't that true?" And it is. I think that what we've done is, with the advent of social media and the internet and all this kind of virtual stuff, it's allowed people to create their own versions of reality, which are much easier for them to digest. And, if T.S. Eliot's telling us that mankind cannot bear very much reality, then they have to create their alternate realities. And we're seeing it every single day. And what's amazing is the reality is created by whoever you tune into. So if you tune into, I remember reading something that like 93% of all like the Christian websites are run by like a Russian bot farm. So they're like polarizing people in interesting ways. So the places that people are going for information that they view as trusted resources are really just, Russian bot farms that are pushing their agenda in a certain direction. So I think the one thing that strikes me wild is that people are getting their information and, more importantly, making their decisions, not actually going out and talking to their neighbors. And this is what was most amazing for me during the pandemic is, whether or not you call it a plandemic or, whatever you want to believe. But I think what it did, which was most damaging, is it took people out of a mode of actually going and talking to their friends and, going into social interactions and realizing that we're not that much different, and allowed people to hide at home and just be polarized with a bunch of information that I don't think is very accurate. And I'll just give you an example. I got hit up. My kids go to a private school. I got hit up by the headmaster to come in and talk to a few parents about walking back some of the COVID protocols. So I said, great, I'll be there at 10 a.m. Saturday morning. I show up. I'm the only one there. Everybody else wanted to Zoom in because they did not want to have a social interaction. So I sat there with the headmaster, and these people Zoomed in because they, didn't feel comfortable coming. And one of the statements was made that the parents like, well, our daughter would feel comfortable not wearing a mask at school when everybody's vaccinated. And I was like, but we know the vaccine doesn't cause transmission. I kind of tried to give them like, this is on the CDC's website. It was never designed to stop transmission. And if kids aren't dying from this, then this doesn't make sense to me. And it was just amazing. Every response that all these parents kicked to me were these emotional responses. There was nothing infactual. There was nothing that was, CDC or like nothing that was backed by any science. It was pure emotion. What if somebody dies? Was like the end piece. And I was like, shit, if we're living our life out of the fear that somebody might die, then I'm not going to get out and drive my car. I'm sure as hell not going to go out and have a drink or go to a concert or do anything else, if that's the idea. So I think what has changed my mind was the fact that I think I have, I don't even know if it's changing my mind. I think I'm losing faith, not in humanity, but I think what makes humanity great is actually social interactions. I think what it's really changed my mind for is I didn't necessarily analyze that. Like what makes us great is the fact that people get together, they sit down, whether it be at a bar, at a table, dinner, interactions, whatever, be social, and they share ideas. And that is a greater paying touch point than sitting on your computer with, metaverse, Facebook, whatever social media platform is now these days. And that's how I'm gleaning all my information, because I think if that's the way you're gleaning all your information, unfortunately, they figured out the algorithms to spit you out the exact information that they want to push to you, to push you into a certain, mode of thinking. And, I like that's to me is by far one of the most interesting things that I've seen. And I was like, is this just something that's happening? But then you go back and you read some of the great authors, or you read some of the great thinkers of the 20th century. And this has been happening for many, many years. This has been happening for 100+ years that we've been moving towards this. What, too deep?
Never. That's a rabbit hole I didn't expect to go down, but
well, it's true. Like I'll just give you an example. What did you say? 93% of all information is lost. Communication is lost between the screen. Mm-hmm. And that, to be able to have you ever tried to use sarcasm on the internet?
Like texting over text?
Yeah. It
all
fails.
The time. But I laugh. That's what matters.
Okay.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, I know you're kidding. Now you're being sarcastic.
I know.
But I know you're being sarcastic because I'm sitting here with you and I can see your face and that terrible mustache.
Yeah.
Easy.
I got a terrible mustache.
I do. In line with communication, I mentioned coaching lacrosse in my town, the importance of returning to work with the novice, the kids 13 to 16 or 13 to 18 that John mentioned that camp. I'm working with those athletes and their parents, and I'm getting these questions that a lot of the clients that the trainers that listen to this podcast are probably getting, and they may be getting mad at them. I can't get mad at them. It's finding a way to remember I was once this same kid, 13, not knowing, and now I have a opportunity because we were living, like we didn't shut down any operations. We were still continuing to podcast, and it unintentionally formed this bubble of, okay, we're awesome. We talk to experts. We know all this, but now I've returned to working with the amateur. Okay, I'm not going to consider these questions stupid, get mad at these kids for not knowing. Okay, let's remember that I was once there and introduce this information, whether it's protein, creatine, the importance of meat. You're not going to get strong from eating out of the vending machine, drinking Cokes, like stay away from Gatorades. Here's a better alternative, LMNT, right? So it's return to like getting out of the echo chamber, the bubble that is the premier podcast in strength and conditioning, Power Athlete Radio, over 500 episodes with the elite in human performance, and returning to the novice and empowering these kids. And we talk about coaching scars. I'm sure you had some positive coaching experiences in your life, in your athlete life cycle. Well, maybe you had negative ones that then turned you off. I certainly had both positive and negative, and the aim to now, with my coaching staff, help them improve their communication. I'll take all responsibility for the strength and conditioning information to empower the kids, but then aid in the other coaches and how they're communicating, reinforcing or punishing. Let's switch it to punishment, and have some impact there in my community. What I do enjoy is seeing the parents at the grocery store and giving the kid a little rib in front of them. So that to have some personality with the kids rather than just the old ball coach.
I hope you're not touching the kids, like
no,
ribbing, like punching them in the ribs.
No, with my words, my communication.
Well, words are weapons, so be careful.
That's the other thing. I'm trying to bring back the candor that we can have some fun, so these kids actually have some social ability to take a joke, ribbing, and then in a light manner and show their parents as well. So open communication with all parents. That's part of the aim and mission, because I am in this community. There's 1,700 people. It's probably blown up by now, but the having some fun there and remembering that I too was once a novice.
Nice.
And one note, I did rib on Les Mills. That was my insecurity. I just looked up the history. He's from New Zealand, 1968, 4-time Olympian. And
they just bought his name.
I understand that.
And then they basically shipping containers around.
At Les Mills, I'm not mad at Les Mills. He was an awesome dude.
No, he was awesome. But Reebok taking on Les Mills, where they were creating like techno raves with spin bikes in containers and then shipping them all over the world. That shit was pretty hokey.
Right. I'm mad at Reebok, not Les Mills, for the record. That was my insecurity speaking. Okay.
Well then, glad we got that out there.
Awesome. You guys are funny. That was an awesome conversation. Yeah, let's wrap up. Do you want to just tell everybody where they can find you? Obviously, your podcast, website, social media, all that jazz.
Yeah, we're easy to find. PowerAthleteHQ.com. If you just put Power Athlete into your search bar, you'll find us at Power Athlete HQ on social media. Power Athlete Radio, if you look for us on anywhere that pushes out podcasts, and YouTube, which what was that? A couple months ago, we decided to go hard into doing the video and the YouTube stuff.
It's like a year, but yeah,
it's been 2 weeks. But that's why we got this cool green screen that we spent a lot of money on to put up for our deal, for our podcast room. So, but yeah, other than that, we're easy to find, Power Athlete. And if you're interested in coaching, training programs, you can find all that at the website. And if you have any questions, just drop a question to info@powerathletehq.com, and you'll probably have somebody nice respond to you right away.
Awesome. I will link all of that in the show notes. Cool. All right. Well, thank you guys for your time, and I'll chat with you soon. Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of MetFlex and Chill. I hope you enjoyed it. It would be awesome if you could give the show 5 stars and leave a review on iTunes. We're trying to get placed in the top 100 health podcasts, and the 5-star ratings and reviews are what can help make that happen. I'll add step-by-step directions for leaving a review in the show notes. I know it's a big ask, but it really helps. Thanks again. See you next time.